Southern Colorado, a land where coal feeds cities and buries people faster than graveyards. In 1888, men went missing here. Not in war, not on the road. They went underground and never came back. The mountains stayed silent. The mine where a woman remained because there was nowhere left to run. This story begins where the choice is simple: submit to the land or survive in defiance of it. That winter, men in the valley vanished without a trace. First, the postman disappeared, then a miner from La Plata. Some were found in the spring, broken and half-buried. Others were never found at all. Noah Harrow returned at that time, coming back to the land he had left long ago without a backward glance. He rode slowly, as if the earth itself might recognize him and deny him the right to step across its dusty surface. Behind him lay years of war with men, and a long, empty peace that had taught him nothing. Ahead stretched a plot of land no one wanted to tend, and a house no one awaited. That same day, he saw her. She stood at the edge of a cliff above the mine, too close to the rim, too still for a passing stranger. The valley whispered about her, that she was a widow, that her husband had been swallowed by the earth along with dozens of others, that she had stayed because there was nowhere else to go. Noah did not yet know her name. He knew only one thing: if she stepped, he would not be fast enough. The wind carved sharp lines through the canyon, carrying dust, the faint echo of falling rock, and the quiet sigh of the valley itself. The earth smelled of cold stone and dry grass, the remnants of snow melting into hard clay. Noah's horse hesitated for a moment at the sight of her, sensing the tension in the air, the invisible thread between them, taut and fraying. One wrong move, one careless step, and the earth might claim her just as it had claimed the others. He stepped closer still, careful not to disturb the silence, not to send a warning that might make her falter. The horse shifted behind him, the soft scrape of hoof on rock echoing through the canyon. She did not turn, did not flinch. Noah knew then that she had been standing there for hours, perhaps waiting for something that had already passed, perhaps waiting for nothing at all. The valley seemed to contract around them, the wind fading, the cliffs holding their breath. Every instinct in him sharpened, the quiet lessons of survival, of patience, of watching and waiting, rising to the surface. He reached the ridge without a sound, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath his boots, the weight of her presence, the unspoken danger lingering like smoke in the cold air. He could not reach her if she fell. He could only stand and watch, a sentinel against a land that demanded obedience, a land that had taken so many before him. And yet he stayed, the only thing between her and the emptiness of the valley, a witness to her defiance, a silent promise that she would not stand alone. For now, the wind carried only the quiet of frozen soil and the distant echo of the mine, and Noah Harrow remained, motionless, knowing that in this place of lost men and whispered fears, the smallest step could change everything. Her name was Mary Eldridge. She lived in a house where every object was a reminder of what had been lost. The mine fed the town, but it took men, health, and years of life in return. After her husband disappeared into the depths, Mary had become part of the background, quiet, convenient, almost invisible. Noah began working the land he had claimed, but the soil resisted him. The ground was rocky, water scarce, winter pressing close. He sought no help and expected none. Yet Mary came on her own, at first with questions, then with food, and later simply to sit silently by the fire. She shared nothing of her past. He did not ask. Between them, a cautious, quiet understanding began to grow. Not comfort, not companionship, but a fragile truce with the harshness of life itself. The disappearances continued in the valley. The town pretended nothing was wrong. Mine owners hurried to expand their shafts, indifferent to the lives lost beneath the surface. Those who knew too much learned quickly that silence was safer than inquiry. The winter wind carried whispers of men who had gone without trace, their absence stitched into every snowdrift, every frozen creek. Noah worked through the biting cold, muscles stiff, hands raw, feeling the pull of the land that gave little and demanded everything. Mary watched, a shadow at the edge of his efforts, steady and unassuming, her presence a quiet defiance against the consuming emptiness around them. Day by day, the land pressed against him, every rock and root a challenge. Yet Noah persisted, carving order from the stubborn soil, learning its hidden rhythms and grudging patterns. Mary stayed nearby, carrying water, tending the small hearth, offering meals without expectation, her quiet resilience mirroring the slow, patient strength he drew from the earth itself. Above them, the mountains stood silent, witnessing the small, persistent human struggle below. Snow drifted into the ridges, ice formed in sharp patches along the creek, and the mine groaned with labor, hungry for men to feed its endless demand. And still, in the shadow of loss and danger, Noah and Mary existed together in the space between survival and surrender, a tenuous, unspoken bond growing as the land itself claimed all that it could. Even as the town ignored the vanishings and the shafts grew deeper and darker, they learned to move through the cold together, each day a measure of endurance, each quiet evening a reminder that, in a land that took so much, it was still possible to hold something sacred and alive.
Noah began to notice details that did not belong to chance. The smell of gunpowder lingered in passages where no blasting should have taken place. The rock walls bore fresh scars where no official work had been recorded. In the washhouse, water ran too long, carrying away more than coal dust. Blood had been there. Someone had tried to erase it carefully, patiently, as if time itself could be fooled. Mary knew more than she allowed herself to say. He saw it in the way her gaze lingered on the mine entrance, in how her hands tightened whenever carts rolled out after dark. She had watched men go underground without their names ever appearing on the lists. She had seen lanterns move through the night long after shifts ended. Some men came back up quietly, escorted, heads lowered. Others never came back at all. The mine presented itself as order and necessity, but beneath that surface it functioned by different rules. Noah felt it the first time he descended. The air changed quickly, growing heavier, tasting of metal and damp stone. The deeper tunnels were narrower, rougher, cut in haste. Support beams stood where they should not have been needed, while other sections were left dangerously bare. It was not carelessness, it was intention. As he moved through the lower levels, patterns emerged. Collapses had been shaped, not suffered. Walls had been weakened in precise places. Explosions had been set not to open new veins of coal, but to seal passages permanently. The mine swallowed evidence as easily as it swallowed men. It became clear why people vanished without noise or protest. The collapses were used to bury more than stone. They buried theft, false weights, altered records, and those who noticed too much. Witnesses were cheaper to lose than prophets. Mary's husband had been one of them. He had seen something he should not have seen, and the earth had been instructed to take him. When Noah surfaced again, the daylight felt wrong, too thin and too honest. The town above continued its routine, unchanged. Horses were fed, coal was weighed, ledgers were signed. No one asked what happened below, as long as the carts kept moving. The danger was no longer distant or theoretical. Noah felt it in the way conversations stopped when he entered a room, in how footsteps matched his pace a little too closely. He was being measured, considered, placed into the same quiet category as the others who had not lasted long. Mary understood before he said anything. She had lived with this knowledge longer, had carried it alone, letting silence protect her where words could not. Now silence was no longer enough. If Noah stayed, the ground would eventually open for him as well, and the town would call it another accident. For the first time in years, she refused to let fear decide what came next.
They tried to leave without ceremony or hope of return. They packed only what could be carried without slowing their steps. The road they chose climbed toward the pass, narrow and exposed, a line of pale dirt cutting through rock and wind. It was a route used rarely, avoided by those who preferred safer ground, but it led away from the mind and the eyes that watched it. The town did not release them easily. They were followed before the sun dropped behind the ridges. Shapes appeared where there should have been distance. Sounds repeated themselves too often to belong to chance. By the time the light began to thin, there was no doubt left. They had been seen. They had been counted. The pursuit was not fast. It was heavy and deliberate, paced by men who knew the land and trusted that exhaustion would do most of the work for them. The ground tore their boots, sharp stone cutting through leather. Cold air burned the lungs with every breath. Each step uphill demanded more than the last, and the distance ahead refused to shrink. Mary felt her strength thinning long before her body failed. The rhythm of walking broke apart, replaced by shorter steps, then hesitation. Her vision narrowed. The past no longer felt like escape, only like another stretch of ground she might not cross. She understood then that she would not last much longer. That was when Noah stopped. He did not turn back in anger or desperation. He simply ceased moving forward, as if the decision had already been made somewhere deeper than thought. He placed himself between her and those approaching from behind, not as a challenge, not as a plea, as an end. Running was no longer an option. There was no distance left to bargain with. The land offered no shelter except what could be taken by force. What followed carried no trace of honor. There were no clean lines, no clear victories, only dirt pressed into skin, breath torn from lungs, and pain accepted as a necessary cost. Movements were clumsy, driven by instinct rather than intent. Survival stripped everything down to its simplest form. When it ended, silence returned unevenly, broken only by wind moving across stone. The past stood empty again, indifferent to what had taken place. The town remained behind them, still breathing, still working, but without proof and without witnesses. No bodies would be claimed, no stories would be confirmed. They moved on as the light faded completely, leaving no clear mark of where they had been or where they were going next.
They found refuge high in the mountains, beyond the reach of the mines and the watchful eyes of the town. The air was thin, sharp, carrying the scent of pine and cold stone. Each day demanded only what was necessary, drawing water from a narrow stream, keeping a fire alive against wind that could steal warmth in minutes, and moving with careful patience. The simplicity of survival became a rhythm, slow and grounding, where each task was a measure of presence rather than ambition. Mary began to change. The silence of the peaks did not oppress her, it held her instead. She learned to fill empty spaces with her own breath, to listen without fear, to find the steady beat of a world that demanded nothing from her except endurance. Nights under the stars offered a quiet kind of companionship, the mountains themselves a barrier against the past and the violence it had carried. She moved among the rocks and trees as if she had always belonged there, as if the land had claimed her, not for punishment, but for protection. In the early warmth of spring, she felt the unmistakable stirring of life within her. It was not miraculous, it was not a reward from the world that had taken so much. It was a continuation, a movement forward where before there had only been stillness and fear. She carried it quietly, almost secretly, and yet it reshaped the way she breathed, the way she moved, the way she understood the small and essential acts of living. Noah watched her transformation without words. There was no need for them. He understood the significance of the life she carried, the strength it represented, and the quiet determination that had grown between them in the cold and the stone. He stayed, not as a protector imposed by circumstance, but as a companion who had chosen the same path. Their days became a shared labor, a cooperation of bodies and wills against the indifferent mountains. Each fire built, each meal gathered, each night survived together was a testament to a life reclaimed. The mountains taught them patience, the wind taught them humility, the snow taught them endurance. Every morning brought new tasks, small and unrelenting, and every evening brought the reward of warmth and the reassurance of presence. There was no past here that could intrude, only the weight of survival and the silent acknowledgement of each other's courage. Mary's breath no longer carried the tension of waiting or hiding. It carried anticipation, a cautious optimism that had grown in the quiet between fear and hope. By the time the first blossoms appeared on the ridges, they had established a fragile rhythm. Noah and Mary moved through the peaks with familiarity, not mastery, learning the limitations of their bodies, the secrets of hidden springs, the ways to coax life from barren soil. The past still existed, shadows in the mind that flinched at sudden noises, but it no longer dictated the present. Their choices were theirs alone. Survival was no longer merely a question of escape, but of living fully in the spaces they had claimed. Mary's transformation was subtle, woven into gestures and glances, into the way she tended the fire, carried water, and watched over the small clearing where they slept. She was no longer the widow of the valley, but a woman reborn in stone, wind, and snow, capable of enduring what had once crushed her. Noah mirrored her endurance, a silent acknowledgement of shared trials and quiet victories. Together, they navigated the terrain, the rhythm of their survival forming a bond stronger than fear or loss, a foundation neither had expected, but both had earned.
They built the house slowly, piece by piece, from the timber they carried down from the ridges and the stones they had gathered over long days. Each wall leaned slightly, uneven and imperfect, each joint a compromise between what they had and what they needed. The roof sagged in places, the floor bowed under weight, yet within these crooked walls there was no fear. Every plank, every nail was a testament to survival, to the labor of two people who had chosen to remain, to endure, to create something of their own in a world that had demanded so much and given so little. The past returned sometimes, unbidden, in dreams that left the cold taste of loss, in sudden noises that sent their hearts racing, in memories of those who had not made it. Shadows moved at the edge of perception, whispering of mistakes and vanished lives. But the present no longer belonged to the past. Within the walls they had built, in the warmth of the fire and the quiet of the nights, the memory of fear could no longer dictate their steps. They acknowledged it, they remembered it, yet they were no longer prisoners of it. Mary no longer stood at the edge, staring into the void, waiting for something to claim her. Her hands, once tense with grief, worked steadily, shaping the home, tending to its small comforts, preparing meals, carrying water, gathering wood. The sharp lines of anxiety softened into determination, and in her eyes a new steadiness grew. She had learned to live in the space between caution and hope, to move without hesitation through the rhythms of the day. Her body carried the subtle confidence of one who had survived, who had endured, who had chosen life despite the odds.
No one no longer searched for what he might flee from. He measured the days not by threats or dangers, but by the simple acts that kept them alive. that made this place a home. His eyes scanned the ridges for storms. His hands built walls and carried supplies. His presence a constant anchor in a world that could still turn harsh without warning. He had ceased to be a man defined by battle or loss. He had become a man defined by the life he was helping to cultivate, by the choice to remain present, fully beside the woman he had come to protect and share this fragile world with. The home was imperfect, far from the comforts of a town or the security of wealth, but it was theirs. Within its uneven walls, the wind that swept through the mountain passes carried not only cold, but also a sense of continuity, a reminder that they had endured, that they had built, that they could continue. Every fire they kindled, every meal they prepared, every night spent in the quiet of the mountains became a testament to resilience. Their lives were stitched together with acts of persistence, a patchwork of survival, of cautious trust, and of shared understanding that grew without words. The mountains remained, indifferent and eternal, but the house stood against them, a small assertion of choice. Here, within these walls, they discovered a new rhythm, a life measured not by what had been lost, but by what could be nurtured. Each morning began with light on the slopes. Each night ended with the glow of fire and the steady warmth of each other's presence. They were not heroes, nor were they untouched by the cruelty of the world. They were simply two people who had endured and chosen to remain, to create a home that offered no promises, only the quiet certainty of mutual strength and the possibility of new beginnings. If these stories of survival, quiet love, and the unseen choices that shape life speak to you, subscribe to the channel. Dust and Devotion Tales.